Welcome to Don't Fuck This Up, the podcast answering the ultimate question, how the fuck did you land that cool job? I'm your host, Lauren Alvarez. Today we welcome to the show Dr. Natazia Stolberg. Natazia is a board-certified acupuncturist, herbalist, and doctor of Chinese medicine. She's the founder of the Way Clinic, as well as the founder and owner of Dr. Stolberg's Tea. I initially got to know Natazia from a patient perspective as she helped me navigate my first acupuncture treatments. I immediately found myself able to trust in her deep intellect and skill, which she also masterfully balances with relatability, not to mention her indelible pickle aesthetic. Natazia, welcome to Don't Fuck This Up.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I think that having you here is such an amazing opportunity to talk about. Everyone's like, Acu, that's woo-woo, needles, I'm scared, and even before we talk about how you came to acupuncture, were you receiving acupuncture, when you were kind of coming up, or did you ever experience it before you went to school for it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the main inspiration behind why I became an acupuncturist.
Amazing.
Didn't grow up in the super alternative space with my parents.
Yeah.
We saw regular doctors.
Meaning Western medicine?
Western.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I am a regular doctor.
Regular
but old
doctor.
School, PCP vibes. In high school, I actually was diagnosed with endometriosis, which now a lot of people know what that is. I had debilitating, painful periods that took me years to figure out what was going on. Once I did, I was very lucky. I saw one of the top surgeons for that condition at Stanford.
Amazing.
Got the surgery, but it didn't help me.
Oh no. So
I was like, what am I going to do?
Let me guess, was it a guy?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's so weird. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So you went, had the surgery. Had recovery.
Yep.
And then nothing changed.
6 months later, I was basically in the same boat, went back to the surgeon, and he was like, well, I can do the surgery for you again.
You're like, that sounds terrible.
Yeah, I was 17 at the time. Yeah, I was like, I think this is not sustainable. So I literally found acupuncture on Google, and I asked my parents, could I try this? And they're like, of course.
Yeah.
I saw one acupuncturist once, then switched to a second who I really connected with, which we can talk about. But I think it's important to find the right practitioner for you versus just saying, you don't like acupuncture because you may have just tried the wrong person.
Yeah.
And the second acupuncturist I went to, she literally changed my life, and she managed my condition. I went to acupuncture all through college. And that was kind of the main inspo behind it.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I mean, and then when you're getting acupuncture, are you going weekly at that point? So you're committing to something. It's like being in ballet or swim team or whatever.
Totally.
You were like, this is my sport.
Yeah. I went really consistently, and then I was able to wean off of going all the time because I felt so good. But just, I think the comfort of even knowing that she could help me if I had horrible cramps or a bad month was just, that was so valuable in itself.
That's amazing. And I think that also, sharing that as vulnerable, just even to be like, hey, this thing with my body is what's happening? And when you're younger, as a teenager, that can be so intimidating.
Yeah.
So it sounds like I'm going to infer that your parents are pretty supportive.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were amazed by what happened to me, and obviously just so happy that I found the treatment that worked for me.
Yeah. And I think having parents that have seen it firsthand, did it make it easier when you were I think I want to do this thing, and we'll talk about it, but was that easier for them to understand? How did they react when you were I want to be an acupuncturist, or was that the dialogue?
I'm lucky. My parents were always you can do whatever you want. Yes. They're very supportive. And I also think they just knew me and my mentality. And they're literally, whatever you do, you're going to be successful, because they just watched me like that as a kid. But I think they just thought it was cool. They're sure, this is different. And my dad's in marketing and my mom's an architect and project manager. So neither of them were in the health field. And so they didn't really have much expectation of I have to be a doctor or a lawyer or something specific. They just were go for it. So.
And do they get acupuncture now?
My mom does. I have given my dad acupuncture in spurts. He doesn't love it.
Okay.
And it ends up being more stressful for him.
Okay.
Which actually only recently learned. He was like, yeah, it just makes me really anxious before coming, even though he knows it helps him. So he sees Jenna, my fiance, more for like chiropractic work. That's what works for him, which again is like acupuncture is not for everybody. You got to find what works best for you. But he's on a lot of herbs. So I've got him with the herbal angle for sure. Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's talk about, so, you know, I think that like part of your story that like I thought was so interesting was like growing up, like you didn't just have a stagnant childhood where you were like planted in one city, planted in one place. You traveled a lot. You have family internationally. Can you talk a little bit about like, did that have influence on you? Just seeing different ways of living and different parts of the world? Or am I making that up?
No, of course. Yeah. My dad is from Germany. He came here for college and stayed, but my entire side of the family with him is still in Germany or in Europe. I lived there for a while when I was younger and then came back here. My parents separated when I was very young. And so I kind of lived like an independent life with each of them, but we traveled a lot. And I think it definitely shaped me into who I am now. Like my mom just took me everywhere. Like I didn't really live like a kid's life. Like we went to like brunch and did all the things. And I think it made
only child vibes, I'm going to be honest.
Exactly. Yeah. Which worked for me. I don't know. Maybe that doesn't for everyone, but I feel like it made me very independent. It made me super comfortable around like older adults. Like I always had friends that were like my mom's friends, even now. And I do think that helps when, you know, one, you're deciding what you want to do. You have like mentors that have already gone through it. They've helped me develop a lot of relationships and like success now because I have people who are, you know,
rooting for
30, 40 years ahead of me versus like only peers. And then of course, traveling, like we traveled all around the world. I think that's easy when you just have one child. Like my mom was like, let's go pack a backpack. And so I got to see so many, beautiful parts of the world. And that's also inspired how we can talk about like, I want to shape my practice and my life going forward, that it's not just like, okay, I just want to buy a house and be here forever. Like I want to be mobile and moving around and giving my kids that experience too.
Yeah. I mean, it's also amazing to think about because I know that you mentioned that like you started, you have your own practice now, but you actually like, even coming out of school, you were like, I want my own thing. I want to be my own boss. But acupuncture is pretty freeing. Like you don't really have to have that much equipment to be able to be mobile. So, while house calls are very time consuming, I think that is part of like the price that you might pay. But like there is actually that component of like you could travel and you could take your practice on the road, so to speak.
Totally. Yeah. You can do whatever you want. And when I first started, I had a concierge practice and I just was like, okay, like you really don't need a bunch. I had everything packed, like organized in a bag. And I was like, here we go. Here
we go. Yeah. I found these needles. We'll use them.
I've only used them a few times.
It'll be great. It's super clean. You'll love it. I think that was like really interesting for me. Something that like you talked about is like your dad being anxious. I'm actually a huge needle phobe. And before I came in for acupuncture, I was like very acu-curious, but so petrified of what I thought to be, they were going to be like sewing needles.
Oh my God, no.
Okay, I had this idea though, that it was going to be like sewing needles or like under the fingernails. I don't know. I made up something like horrible.
Yeah.
And then you like showed me the needle and I was like, oh, that's it. It's like a hair.
Yeah, literally like you can bend it.
Yeah, it's so small that I was like, okay, well, that's very wimpy of me. I still have like full meltdowns at Western doctors. They have to lay me down to like take blood and stuff, but I have never fainted from acupuncture.
No.
Which is great.
And that's not talked about enough. You really have to think about the types of needles. So like the needles we're used to take something out of our body or put something in. And so they have a hole in them. So one, they're much thicker. And two, the part that hurts the most is actually that this is like, I don't want to be graphic, but like they're literally punching a piece of your skin out as they go in.
Little samples.
Acupuncture is not like that. They're so thin. They've done really cool, like, I don't want to say it's not a study, but like close up magnified visuals. And they are so thin, they push the skin cells to the side. Yeah. Which is why when you take them out, there's like usually almost no trace that they've even
I've looked before. I've been like, where was this? I don't know. Yeah. That's pretty amazing. I always get a lot of shit at the doctor. They're like, but you have so many tattoos. I'm like, also that's different. Like it's all there. There are many different types of needles. I'd like to see that Instagram post, please. Just break them all down.
Yeah, we can have like a nice visual of all of them.
Really helps like with the anxiety. But so let's go back to like when you were originally in school, you wanted to be a surgeon. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a pretty big pivot. You know, you're not taking any pieces out of people with needles or tools.
No.
You're giving energy, moving it around. Talk to me about how did you come to that realization that you did not want to be a surgeon?
Yeah, this is a good story that I'm excited to share.
Okay,
it's
good.
Like the real reason I didn't become a surgeon, or the real reason I became an acupuncturist. Most people don't know, but I have a very long, this goes back to like the German European side, of a very long name, 7 names in total.
Yeah. I think your fiance has all those initials tattooed right?
on her. Yeah.
Yeah.
All 7 of them. So when I was young, decided I'm going to be a doctor. Then I got a little older. I'm like, I want to be a surgeon because that's what makes money. And I was like, I want to make money.
We like money. Let's be real.
Yeah. Why not? I was pre-med in college. I studied for the MCAT, which is the entrance exam after school. I ran like a clinical research department for a plastic surgeon. Like I did all these things to bolster up my resume to get into med school because it's one of the hardest things ever to do. And took the MCAT once, did fine, wanted to take it again. Studied my butt off for it. Like I was like 3 months, I'm like going to tune out the whole world and take this test.
I'm sure you were a real delight.
Yeah. Right. I'm studying. Mind you, along this path, there were so many little like whispers of like, this is not right for you.
And
like,
you ignored them.
Even down to studying. I had this tutor and I would drive to see him once a week and I would be physically ill before each session just because I was like anxious that he thought I was stupid. Like I'm not stupid, but I'm not good at physics, which I think is okay. And just through that path, I just was like, but I have to do this. Like I decided, I don't know, when I was like 8, I'm going to be this type of doctor.
Yeah.
And
so
I just was like
this idea of what it was going to be. And you were like, I can't waver from this path.
I was like, what else would I do?
Right. Exactly. It's become part of your identity because you've been telling that story for so long.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I go to take the MCAT the second time. We actually had to go up to Seattle. My mom came with me because they were changing the whole exam. This was the last year you could take this one type of exam that like everyone tutored for and all the books were for. I was like, all right, this is it. This is my shot. So we go up there. It's a whole meditative practice. You like wake up. I like had the same thing I ate and that I drank and I was ready, all my practice tests. I go into the testing center and they're like, yeah, we don't have your name on file.
Oh, you're serious?
Yeah. And I always come prepared because of my crazy name, driver's license. I usually bring my passport too.
Oh, good.
Like,
we'll check that later.
Yeah. I'm like, I just got to like be sure because it's a crazy name.
Of course. Yeah.
And if you've ever been to one of these testing centers, like they're not, I don't want to be mean, but it's just like people getting paid a minimum wage to check you in, check you out, pat you down.
Imagine like the DMV.
It's exactly like that.
Okay.
Forgetting that there are kids like me who are like, my entire future is riding on this exam. We're anxious. Everyone's there. You all get let in at the same time.
Yeah.
Like it's a stressful
like a whole
thing.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, okay. So they, do a little bit more typing and they're like, okay, we did actually find you, but your name's been inputted improperly.
Oh.
And I was like, okay.
Because that's your fault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like, one of the middle names is in the last, like something was just switched, but the whole name was there. They're like, sorry, like it has to be proper in these specific fields. We can't admit you.
No.
Yeah. And I'm like trying to stay calm because I'm like, if this gets fixed, I've got to go into this exam, which is multiple hours and like, deliver. They're like, you got to like, they're like basically shooing me off. Like you can call the help center.
No,
we got to check in the next person. I was like, wait, what are you like? What help center? Who do I call? So my mom's waiting outside for me. I'm literally in the corner with, I don't know, 50 other kids trying to call this help center to figure out what am I going to do. And they're like, we're so sorry, but this happens every day.
That was it?
Yeah. They're like, they can't let you in. They can't let you in.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, if this happens every day, this is a problem.
Solution.
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong with
you?
Nope.
Didn't get let into the test.
So the universe was finally like, okay, you're
literally
not
like slap me across the face.
Signs. We're going to have to totally roast you.
Yep. Yeah.
So then what happened?
I mean, I left, I was like, obviously like depressed in a bathtub drinking champagne back in the day when I used to drink for the weekend. My mom's like, do you want to go home? What do you want to do? I'm like, no, I don't want to go back to reality because we had this whole weekend planned after. We're like, let's stay in Seattle and do some fun stuff.
Does Seattle still hold like a
I haven't been back. I don't think.
It's okay. I've only been there once. Yeah.
Good thing it wasn't like a really amazing place.
Yeah. It wasn't in Paris. Yeah.
Exactly. Would have made an exception.
Yes, totally.
So at that point, obviously we came home after the weekend and went through the horrifying thing of like having to tell everyone, right? Everyone knew I was taking this test. Like, how did it go? How was it? And I had to relive it over and over and over again. But that was really the moment where I was like, if this represents even like a small part of the Western medical field of it being so unforgiving and so like black and white. And I was like, I don't know if I even want to be a part of that.
Right. Because at that point, you're kind of like, I've put myself through all of this training, all of this studying, all of these like painful moments. We spent money to travel to like
the test is expensive. Yeah.
And there was just sort of this unapologetic, like, it's over.
Totally.
So how long from when that happened to when you were like, what's next? Because we have to kind of like tuck your tail and like mourn your losses. And like, I've been there too, where you're just like, this is a plan. And then the universe is like, nope. Hilarious. I love that you thought that. That's so cute. It's not happening.
Yeah.
And then you sort of have to grieve that.
Totally.
So what was that process like for you? And then how did you come to what was next?
Well, I was really thankful that in the airport on the way there, I had this weird moment, which now I realized is like fate almost.
Yeah.
But at the time was, I think, me being scared of like, what if I don't get a good enough score? What if I don't get into, school? And I had this moment where I was like, maybe I'll just be an acupuncturist. But I think after having had that thought, it gave me like something to hold on to. Like, it's not like I had zero ideas. I was like, at least that is an idea. I went to a couple months of therapy also to like try to like
love therapy. Yes.
unravel this. And which was also amazing because she was like, let me tell you, I have a lot of patients who are Western medical doctors. None of them are happy. Like none of them.
I have a lot of patients who are Western medical doctors, period. Yeah. You're like, oh, yeah. Got it. What I heard you say.
Yeah. And I was like, wow. And she's like, they love what they do, but the insurance system has changed the way they can do it, the way they can help patients, and none of them are fulfilled. She's like, so maybe this is like a huge blessing, which now that I'm in the field I'm in, it is like, there's
my executive coach always says, and what is the gift? And I'm like, sometimes I'm like, I don't know. I don't fucking know. The gift is not coming, and then I'm like, the gift. And hindsight is 2020, right? You're able to see it. But in the moment you're like, these gifts feel like curses.
Huge curses. Yeah. So it all happens for a reason. It's the most annoying thing to say. And like you said, it's easy to look back and be like, wow, that was all for a reason, but it is. Yeah. Like once you see the steps, you're like, that was all put in play. And I think eventually I would have ended up where I am now. And I'm just happy it happened that way. So.
Right. Because at least you didn't go through like 3 years of medical school.
Oh my God. Even a semester, like any amount of time.
All the money that goes into that. Yeah. I mean, I know people who work in fashion that were pre-med. It's like, well, hold on a second. Like that story right there is wild. But so then you went to school for acupuncture and herbs, or is it for Chinese medicine? What does the school programming look like?
Acupuncture and Chinese medicine is like kind of the one program, at least in California. Okay. Other states you can choose to have just acupuncture as a license and you don't have to do herbs, but California is not like that. I went to a school that I chose particularly because at that time it was like the best and first doctorate program because there are a lot of acupuncturists who have masters, which is also great. Right. Yeah. But I just was like, I want to still use some of the science part. And we had like cadaver labs and it gave me that fix that I felt like I was going to get from medical school.
I mean, adds a couple extra letters after your name. Yeah. Not mad at that. You have now more initials. Yeah.
More. Exactly.
More initials.
And I just saw that as the future. I'm like, eventually the masters, I'm sure, will be weeded out and everyone will move towards a doctorate. So I'm like, why not just be kind of at like the cutting edge of that?
Yeah, I think, and California is great for that. And, not perfect in a lot of ways, but like, I think also like thinking about schooling and education, like sometimes does have these bolstered programs, which
Now it's transferable. Not that you want to leave. I don't want you to go anywhere, please. But you could actually go to like another state and have more credentials than even what's required.
Totally.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Always good to have more.
Yeah. Stock up on those credentials. Yeah. So, I mean, in schooling, talk to me a little bit about like, was it kind of like word is bond? Everything they teach you is like tremendous and amazing. Or is some of it kind of like, disagree? Because school can be like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think there were things I loved, things more so once I left, things that I would have changed about the program that I was in. But every program is like that. And now I have so many people asking me like, where should I go to school? And I'm like, they're all great and bad in their own ways.
Yeah. Does it matter where you go to school?
Not really.
Okay.
They really just are like
just California.
Getting you to pass. Yeah. I think if you want a license here, go to school here because they prepare you for the test. Totally. We have our own test.
Yeah.
I think it's just like what you're looking for. Some schools are very like full on. That's what I did. I was just in school for 15 weeks on, 2 weeks off for almost 4 years.
Okay.
Other schools are like self-paced and night class. Like for me, I didn't want that. I'm like, I got to just like get in, get out and be immersed in that setting.
Like a night class kind of person.
No. Yeah. And I was lucky I didn't have to like, I didn't have a family or have a full-time job, which some people do. And that's perfect for them. But I think it's good. You tour all the schools and you decide. But in school, it's funny. I think the education was great. And I loved like a lot of my professors were from Taiwan. Like they, are just like masters at what they do. And they're just here now to like teach us.
Which is incredible. Returning the gift. Yeah.
Yeah. But the business sense is not there. Right. Yeah. Which is like also what we're here to talk about. It's just not part of the curriculum, which I wish it would be. We had one business class, which was taught by a chiropractor, which the school I was at also had chiropractors. And it follows a somewhat similar model, but I was like, that feels weird. I should probably have someone who has an acupuncture practice teaching me what to do.
Yeah.
But they didn't want to like split us up. So they just like threw us all in there together.
So there's no like acupuncture MBA.
No, but there should be. there really should be.
Okay. So that's maybe next.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Book idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I was in school, we, worked in a student clinic.
Yeah.
Worked our butts off and they're like seeing 4 patients an hour and just, it was like madness. It's all insurance based. And towards the end, you get really close to your professors and the people who you're working under and like, what are your plans? What are you going to do? And I always knew I didn't want to take insurance.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to be part of that.
Yeah.
And they literally would look at me. They're like, you'll never make it if you don't take insurance.
Really?
Oh yeah.
But also anybody who's ever dealt with like a super bill, it's the most annoying pain in the ass thing, even like as a patient, especially as a patient, I would actually say it's like being your own medical billing specialist, which I'm not capable of. And it's just so frustrating. I think it's like, it's very unpredictable. You don't actually know if or what you're going to get reimbursed. Like there's a million things I could say.
Right. And that's best case scenario, right? Like people who do super bills, which I don't even really do, that's like, I'm getting paid the full amount from the patient, then I have to create them a super bill and then hopefully they get reimbursed. But even for me to do that takes like an hour to make all of them.
And then you're making less money per hour as a specialist. And so you're actually losing off the top of like your income.
Yeah. But if you take insurance, like actually contracted with an insurance company, I mean, you can get paid between like sometimes $20 to $50 a patient. Like you can't live off of that.
No,
there's literally no way. So then that's when you get forced to see 4 patients an hour and like you're churning through people and you're not giving them the individualized care that like I give to my patients because I can.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah.
What were some of the other things that you were like vehemently disagreeing with in school that they teach?
I mean, professional dress,
what
right?
Is that?
Like in school, we had to wear these white coats, like a shorter version. Once you graduate, you get the long white coat version. But when you're an intern, you get a short coat. I wish I have pictures somewhere of me. We had to wear that every time we were in clinic with patients because that's how they would like take us seriously.
Oh my gosh.
That's what they said.
If you came in like a white coat, I would be like, I'd be more scared actually.
Yeah.
I would have been a lot more
there's
scared.
white coat syndrome. So they were very particular about that and being like, this is, what's tied to being a doctor and that's what's going to give you legitimacy. And I just don't agree with that. Like I treat people in crop tops and like dress like this.
Yeah.
And because that's what feels authentic to me. And if someone doesn't feel comfortable with that, totally fine. That's just not my patient. Like they can go to someone who does wear a white coat. But I was always getting like, because we could wear kind of what we wanted under, but there are also rules. And I was always like,
how do I under the white coat?
No, we weren't allowed. But I'm like, how can I have a vibe like under this coat to still feel comfortable and like confident?
Yeah.
Because that was like my work at the time.
It's also, I feel like it takes away also, I mean, that feels like such a man's world kind of definition of like taking away like any like, you know, kind of pulse of like femininity or anything that like individuality. And like, it's so interesting, you know, when I started out, like I was really self-conscious being like a heavily tattooed woman. Like it was always something that like, I felt like I needed to like be stressed over. Like I waited till I was 30 to get my hands tattooed. It was like a really big deal, you know? And like, I also realized that like, I don't want to work at a fucking company that doesn't respect who I am or what I look like or like, but it took me a long time to sort of step into that about myself because I felt like I needed to fit into what they saw me as and not be authentic.
Yeah.
And I remember I very, very much like I have a vivid picture of being in an interview and pulling my sleeves down like over my wrists to cover my tattoos and just I could feel the guy interviewing me like boring holes in my like arms. And I was like,
of course you're like, that's gotta be the most insecure position.
You're like, you're like a little like mouse, like, ah! And that's so not my personality. No. And obviously I didn't get the job because I probably looked like a freak. Like they were like, not because I have tattoos, but because I was so deeply uncomfortable.
Totally.
And I was like, this is crazy. But I think that it is something that like people feel like they need to look a certain way or be a certain way. I mean, we could talk about like diversity or the lack thereof in a lot of these spaces, you know, and when you don't really see yourself represented, it's harder to imagine you being in that space. So as a doctor, as an acupuncturist, as anything, you're like, where's the me version of this?
Right.
Like, I don't see it.
Right. Which I've just found as like an opportunity. I was like, if that doesn't exist, like there are girls that look just like me and dress just like me and have all the same problems as me. And that's like my demographic a lot now. They're like, I felt like you've been through that, or like
girls
I'd actually want to be friends, or that goes such a long way.
It really does. And I think that also just like coming into a space and being like, oh, I don't feel judged by talking about like this problem. I'm sure somebody who has endometriosis, you're going to say, oh my God, I did too. And this is what helped me. And so I think that it builds, you know, trust and rapport, like right off the bat.
Yeah.
I mean, besides business, I mean, Jess, anything else that like you hated about school, or is there anything that like you really carry with you? I mean, obviously learning the points, I'm sure was
very important,
but like, is there anything else that you're like, wow, this was actually like a really good takeaway that I use all the time and I never thought I would?
No. I mean, I learned a lot from like the doctors that I studied under, because you have to think each of them have been doing this for, you know, 15, 20 plus years, and they've really like honed their craft. And then they're just giving you this like, you know, like the spark notes of what works and like being able to write that down. And some of those treatments are still ones I use, especially for pain. So I'm like, hey, this guy's spent 20 years deciding what's the best for shoulder pain. Like, why do I need to, you know, rewrite it?
Yeah.
Like it works. I use it. So really learning from their knowledge. And then I like to also pass that on to people. Like I'm not weird or secretive about the points or protocols I use, because if it can help someone else, great. But that's, I guess I wish I would have believed them more that you're in school to pass the licensing test. Like that's literally what you do.
True. I mean,
and then everything else you learn after is like, shit, like, what do I do? And I still like have cases where I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I go home and I pull out all my books and I study up. Like that's going to be the rest of my life, because every person is different. And I don't want to use the same, you know, loose protocol on like every patient.
So beyond that, I mean, like you've worked in also like more corporate structures, things like that, stepping into spaces that don't feel like you. I mean, it sounds like maybe you didn't take your own advice there. Not judging, definitely have done that. So what is it, you know, that going into a corporate space initially attracted you? I mean, I definitely have scarcity mindset, knowing like, hey, all this could go away. So when you see something more corporate, was it the attraction of like, this will be stable?
Part of it. I was running a concierge practice. So I was like just traveling all around LA and like hustling to see
LA
patients.
Traffic. Like.
It was crazy. And like carrying this huge table with me while wearing like, you know, heels and booties and looking cute. And I just was like tired of it. And I also realized like, I don't know if I'm the best version of myself in that way. Like one or two patients, treating them at home, sure. But like one to the next, being stressed about traffic, maybe not. So I was introduced to this wellness club that I worked at, And I saw an opportunity, and that's also like, that's me, right? I'm like,
absolutely.
There was an acupuncturist kind of hidden in the back. She was there one day a week. She wasn't busy. And I was like, well, this isn't right. Like, this has got to be bigger.
Why
if I'm going to work here.
Secret? Yeah.
I called it the stepchild of the space. Yeah. I'm like, it's like the forgotten, if someone calls and begs for acupuncture, they would like get it, but that's not how it should be. So I slowly tiptoed my way in of being like, okay, I'll do 2 days. Okay, I'll do 3 days. And then it became, I think, a challenge for me. I'm like, I'm going to make acupuncture and like the Chinese medicine department equal to all the other departments that were there. And I think that really drove me for like the first year I was there. And I did it. And like, I filled out my whole schedule and I built this whole thing. And it was like proof of concept to them, you know, like this can be a way to bring in a huge amount of revenue and help people and integrates well with the space. But then I like kind of created this, I don't want to say it's a problem, but like I created this job for myself that I realized I didn't really want in the end, which involved like opening more clubs and managing a bunch of acupuncturists and
like the business side of it.
The business side
more than the practice side of it.
Yeah, I was like learning managerial skills because I like to be good at everything I do. And I mean, I'm not a manager, right? So now I'm like spending nights reading books on that instead of on acupuncture. And that was kind of the pivotal point. And you were a huge part in that. Like you were my patient during that time. You were of like me feeling like, well, I'm not bad at it. Yeah. And I think people have to remember that you can be good at something and not like it. And that was me. I was like, this isn't bringing me a ton of joy for me to like move up. Cause there was I was capped out on like the salary I was making and the patients I was seeing. Yeah. For me to move up through that, I had to give up patients, which was always offered. Like you can move even more into corporate and like see less
like
patients.
A second admin day? You're like, absolutely not.
Yeah. I was like, but patients is what I love. Yeah. And I just felt kind of like stuck. Yeah. And I was always, my fiance makes fun of me now because she's like, you're always doing all these calculations. So I was like, okay, if I saw this same amount of patients and I charged the same amount, but then I had to rent a space. And then and I was like, well, it's about the same. Yeah. And that's what kept me there. Yeah. Right. I was like, well, it's about the same, which now I'm like, I should have it would have, even if it was the same, I would have just been happier. And like insurance, that kept me forever. I'm like, well, I don't want to have to pay for insurance. I know. Like I'm making 3 times as much now. Like I could care less about the money I spend on insurance.
And also like, it's so funny because I actually remember that as part of like a conversation that we had. And you were like, I was like, so like, what's the plan? Like, what's your escape plan? And you were like, well, I think like a couple of years and, you know, having the benefits, like wanting to start a family, like I think, and those are really real factors. I think especially like as a person who can be pregnant, you're like, oh, this is definitely like, I need this protection. I need this like kind of safety net. And it does sort of the golden handcuffs, I call it sometimes, but I remember that conversation very specifically because I was like, really? The insurance? That's what's keeping you?
But I'm sure that really resonates with people. Everyone has their own silly thing that like really keeps them in the job that they know is not right for them forever. Yeah. And I think, again, like going back to intuition and those little feelings, like I had explored it and thought about it for, a long time and many times out of frustration. But then there was just one day I woke up and I was like, I have the energy to do it. It felt right. And I just was like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to leave. I'm going to start my own practice regardless of what happens, even if it like, you know, business goes down and then like, I knew I would be fine.
But like, also like that didn't even become the reality.
Not at all.
It never does. I mean, like when my husband and I were buying our first house, he was like, well, even if we lose 40% on this property, I'm like, how is that going to happen? And we ended up selling it for 30% more than we paid. It's like,
you have to be prepared.
You have to kind of like go through the steps of like, what if this really fucks up?
Totally.
But yeah, I mean, I remember it was literally like you and I talked about like the insurance thing. And then like 2 weeks later, you're like, so I'm going to start my own thing. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, let's fucking do it.
You have to. When you have that drive and that feeling, like you have to be smart. Yes. And I was also very smart. Like I knew like, okay, I have this much saved. I had a plan. I put a lot of steps into place before, like, can I find a space? You know, my partner's income was stable and that was like also very good. I'm lucky I have my parents. Like if all went to shit, like I'm not going to get evicted.
Like what's your plan B? And then maybe like a plan C.
Just in case.
Like there's a plan D hidden under the mattress just in case.
Totally. Yeah. And then also knowing as you start to do it, if things fall into place, like it's meant to be.
Yes.
And that's what happened. I like reached out to a friend. Hey, do you have any studio space? Oh my God. Yeah, we've got this spot. Actually, we have 2. You can choose. And I was like, this is all just.
It was kind of spooky. Like, I mean, I remember talking about it and you were like, yeah, so I have this like space. Actually, there's a second space that's even bigger that has a little kitchen. So I can have space for the tea. And I was like, okay, this literally, sometimes when you're putting something out, it's living in here for so long, like deep in your chest, and you're like, it's scary, but you start to say it out loud, it becomes so real. I mean, it's also like in relationships of like, you know, past relationships, if you're like, oh, I might want to break up with this person, you could think of it for a long time, but when you start talking about it to your friends, oh, it's over, forget it, happening. It's done. You're single. So, I mean, I think like you sort of emancipated yourself from that situation, and everything pointed like, yes, Natazia, keep going this way.
Keep going this way. Yeah. And then also realizing the support that I think I had hard times during that like corporate job that I was really just, I don't want to say down, but like, I was like, God, this is just not really right. But I always showed up for my patients.
Yes.
Like no one would have known.
100%.
And in the end, like that, I think is like what gave me the freedom, because like I took care of them always, and they all took care of me when I left. Like every single patient came with me.
Yeah.
And I think it's really easy in a job. You start to get stressed and you're unhappy, and then you like let that bleed out to everybody, but you can't do that, especially if you plan at some point to leave. Like remember who will keep you afloat.
And it poisons the well. Like I think that like, I mean, I've been for treatments at places and, you know, for other things, and like they're speaking too openly about their other clients or revealing like kind of the shit behind the curtain that you're like, hey, I didn't want to know that about this place. And I actually like being a patient or a client here.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're kind of like, well, is it this person or is it the place? And you get a bad vibe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that like your professionalism, like you have such a unique balance of like, as someone who has been your patient and had the privilege of that, like there's a professionalism, and then there's also this deeply personal side. Like I feel like you really do get to know the real Natazia, but then also Dr. Stolberg is in the room, you know, and it's like, there is like a really nice balance there. And I think that tension, like you can't make that up. You can't learn that in school.
Yeah. And you
so,
have
like,
to have a separation.
Oh
like,
yeah.
I don't tell all my patients if I'm having a bad day, right? Because part of my job is like also to be an aspirational figure in whatever way that they see me. And like, I've had that experience where I like got to know someone too well, and I was like, oh, I wish I just didn't know that. And she was just that ideal I thought she was, you know?
Exactly. You know, 100%. And I think that it is also like, I think when you have a personality that people naturally want to like connect with or share things with. I run into this all the time where people like tell me too much and I'm like, whoa. And also then I go into like career coach mode and I'm all of a sudden spending my time that I'm paying for a service or I'm having an experience or supposed to be, that I'm now the coach and I'm telling you like how to plan your wedding or like whatever I can like give you, because I love to share wisdom and experience, but like there's a time and a place.
Yeah.
And then like, if you're having a bad day, I mean, like sometimes not making that the main topic actually helps you get through it.
Totally. No, none of my patients, it's not their business.
Yeah,
you know, so.
Totally. Well, I mean, and I think like when you talked about your patients being so supportive, you've now been in your space for several months. Are we like almost
4 months?
4 months. Okay. I was gonna say almost 6 months. Okay. So it's been amazing. It also like went up like very quickly. Like you were able to, and some of that I think was those things falling into place, but you have very much like you're a hustler. Like you have this like entrepreneurial push to you, which I think is like very admirable, big Aries energy, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so if someone isn't a fire sign, how do they get that? But no, I mean, really like, you kind of went from 0 to 1,000. Talk about like your mentality going into the space and saying like, I need to be set up. Was it like X date, or was it like, it doesn't have to be perfect? Like, what did you make peace with to move that quickly?
That's a really good question. Well, once I've like decided I want something, I just will make it happen.
Yeah,
and
no,
I think you,
I mean, relatable and also like, yes,
you've seen.
Yes.
I think once that switched in my mind of leaving and starting my own, I just was like, holy shit, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah.
Like, and of course there were like ways of going through it professionally where I had to like notify people at certain times and like really make sure I had a space and all of those things. But I did kind of move as quickly as I possibly could because I was like, this is just the time to do it. And I also started to feel again, like unwell. There were, a few weeks where I was like, I know I'm leaving, but no one knows yet. that was the worst period.
The body keeps the score.
Oh my God.
Like it really, like that kind of stress will
horrible.
make you very
I couldn't
sick.
eat lunch there. Like I just couldn't eat there. And finally Jenna was just like, you got to just tell them a week early. Like we've got to move this up because this is like not good for you. So, so basically like just getting out when it was time to get out. And then the space that I wanted was not ready.
Okay.
A friend of mine owns a building and I was like, this is the one I want. She's, no, it's gonna be many months for it to be ready. I'm like, no, I need it now.
Yeah.
Like, what can we
Change
do?
That.
Mm-hmm. They were amazing and turned it over for me in like kind of a half condition. Like some of the things weren't done. I was like, it's fine. It's going to function. It'll be okay. I literally pulled furniture from my house, which some of that stuff is still in there. Cause I'm like, I'm just going to do whatever I can. And then all the supplies and that's, easy.
And they say like perfection is the enemy of good. I think like it's hard because I know like you also like have like a very like beautiful aesthetic that you bring to spaces. And I know that you're like really into design and the vibe has to be right. I mean, we're like, it's not just vibes, but there is some energy in the service that you're providing. So wanting to kind of like find that balance, I can imagine would be really challenging.
It was. And I was definitely crazy like those weeks leading up to it. Things were not right. And I am a perfectionist, but
it's subjective.
Totally.
Yeah.
But I think realizing like this new space and studio is my energy. And that was the biggest takeaway. It's like patients who came in, they were coming from this super fancy place, which I felt insecure. Like, are they going to be okay with that? It's a small little studio. Everyone loves it. They're like,
oh my God. Yes.
One, this is more your energy. And they were all coming to see me. So like, that's actually the energy that they also feel more comfortable in. It's warmer, it's brighter. It's a completely different vibe. And people have just like resonated. I've gotten better results. Patients are happier. I think also because I'm happier. And at the end of the day, like I'm literally putting my energy in you. So I've got to be in a good space. But it's not that it wasn't hard. Like it was definitely super stressful.
Yeah.
And there's still things I would change, but I've learned to be like, I have other big next steps. And I'm like, what am I going to compromise now so that I can have those things later? Like you just can't have everything all at the same time. So.
And also people don't necessarily notice. It's like going to a party with a pimple on your face.
Nobody.
Like no one's gonna be like, well, Natazia was cool, but that pimple, like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like that is not at all the vibe.
No one notices.
Mm-hmm. I didn't even notice. You mentioned that you got your floors done.
Oh my God.
And I literally didn't even notice that they weren't done until you had like pointed it. I was like, oh yeah, I guess they're done now. But it was so like, cause you had a beautiful rug and it was like, I wasn't there for the floor.
Yeah.
I was there for like you and to like experience the space and like yes, it was kind of like going from like a dark cave was like the old place and now there's like this like brightness in the space. It's warm in there. Like we were always battling the AC, I remember, because I would be so cold during my appointments and like Chinese medicine, like it's all about like you do not want that cold air blasting on you.
No.
Like I don't think anybody does.
No.
But it was definitely like a shift, even like temperature shift in the space. It was like, oh, this is really good.
Yeah, which I love because I love to be warm. And I was always stressed, like, what am I going to wear so I'm warm enough? And now I'm like, it's almost too warm, but And
you had to wear like certain colors, right? You were supposed to wear like black at the space you were at before.
No color, no patterns, no white.
And here you are in like this lilac and emerald situation. Yeah. I mean, this is the vibe.
And it changes by day. Like sometimes I want to be in all black. Great. Yeah. But sometimes I want to be in all pink or I want to wear a white t-shirt. Like, hello.
A perfect white t-shirt.
Perfect white t-shirt. Yeah.
Yeah. My very first boss, I worked for like 7 years and he was amazing. He was also like totally nuts. Like as we've all had that person that we've worked for that we're like, I'm scared of you, but like also I'm learning.
Yeah.
You're a genius. I had to wear all black. And I had to wear a blazer like all the time. But I actually made it so that I could have a fashion spend budget by season. So I mean, yeah. So I was
negotiated.
So I negotiated. So I had like a budget where like, he was a fan of like Rick Owens and Yoji and Andy Milanister. So I really learned a lot about like avant-garde fashion and had a really great black blazer collection. Because if you're going to have to do it, you might as well make it worth it.
Yeah.
And then it kind of just became part of my aesthetic. I love a blazer. I fuck with a blazer, but like on my own terms.
Exactly. You don't have to do it every day.
And I did go through a period where I was like very opposed to wearing all black. Because just, you got to kind of get out of it.
And I have some rules for myself. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go in like athletic wear or like, I have some, because I want to also have a separation of like casual personal life and work life. But that's something I talk about a lot is like, I don't dress totally different when I'm with patients than I do on a regular day because that feels so weird to me. Like,
like this is my work persona,
these are my
and then this is my slacks, my chinos.
Yeah,
these
exactly.
Chinos.
I mean, I have cool slacks, but they're
and
like
I have
a vibe.
Cool chinos, but like they have an interesting shape to them. We're not doing like pressed pleats or like Target or whatever. I don't know. Sometimes we do. But yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, what's kind of the response been from your patients? I mean, I just told you my response, but like outside of me, what else are people saying about your space and kind of the change? The vibe is different. Like what else?
Everyone just loves it. And like seeing everyone's face when they walk in, because it's just one big room and like so much light. And they're like, it's just, I have pictures of it like on Instagram or whatever, but nothing really does it justice. And I think, well, the exciting thing, which we can talk about, is like hopefully what's next and where we're going to expand. And I have so many more plans, but like this is just a stopping point. Like it's the perfect place, but it's not the place forever. And I want to keep making it better for patients and for me. And like when my style changes, but it's simple in there. Like you've been in there. There's not a lot of stuff. It's just like what I need.
You can really focus on like why you're there.
Totally.
I think that's the amazing part is like you show up and you're like, oh yeah, I'm not here for like a luxury experience. I'm not here to cryogenically freeze myself.
Yeah.
I'm here to like
heal
and I'm here to like to rest. And it's always amazing to me. Like I know that you've done some partnerships with Aura Ring and like I'm a big fan of the Aura Ring. But how sometimes it will track it as a nap when I'm literally, sometimes we'll chat during my appointment and I'm lying there and we're having a actual conversation and it will track it as a nap. And I'm like, it just shows
your
how
nervous
restorative
system.
And the nervous system is just at ease. And it's been really fascinating for me. I feel like I've learned a lot about acupuncture just becoming a patient. But I also feel like you're really open with sharing information too. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think aside from the vibe, the biggest change too has been just the freedom. Like, I'll be like, I think I'm going to change this. And I'm like, should I do it? Yep. Okay, great. And we do it, and I'm like always changing things. Sometimes like on a weekly basis, there's no like corporate ladder to go through and approvals and people saying yes or no that actually have no idea what that would mean or affect. Being flexible in that way with myself and changing like the terms of how I see patients. Like now it's really like if they're dealing with chronic things, like we're seeing each other for 3 months and you're on this specific treatment plan. And if that's not for you, that's okay. Like you want to come and go as you please, go to a different acupuncturist. But before I felt like I couldn't just decide that for myself without someone else approving it. And now I'm like, this is what I want to do. And I tried it and it works. And so I'm going to keep doing it. Because I think as practitioners, we know what's best. And to have someone telling you, actually, no, that doesn't fall in line with the KPIs and whatever other
Sales.
BS is like, you don't want that limitation when that's actually what's best for your patients. You know?
It was always interesting kind of at the more corporate place, like where I first started seeing you as a patient, because I went there for you. Like you said, a lot of people, I think everyone was just there for you. I don't think anyone like accidentally saw Dr. Stolberg, but like if they did,
they're lucky.
If they did, then they became a client for life. But I think that was really interesting because then I'd like be in this like like trance coming out of just like this amazing experience. And then it was like, how was your service today? And I was like, what? Like, I'm not,
do you want to leave a tip?
Do you want to leave? Do you want to leave gratuity? And I'm like, what? No, like what just happened? Like, and my like high was just totally like smashed. And then I like went into the jarring sunlight. Was like, like just totally like, So definitely feel like some of like the energy vampires have been vanquished.
Totally. Yeah. You should be able just to come in and out privately. And like, even if you don't want to say a word to me, like I schedule people out months in advance. So they don't have to deal with that. Like, I don't want to have you whip your phone out right after, like just,
I think the transactional kind of pressure that comes with like a lot of like services sort of loses the magic. And I remember speaking with somebody like in a very different space before years ago, and it's always stuck with me. And he was like, you come in, you have this like amazing like energy exchange, and he's a piercer. And he was talking about, you go through this experience where you're literally like very intimately involved with someone's body, even their ear, it's still your body. And then at the end you're like, and that will be $250. And it's like, what just happened? So it's like, you sort of lose that. So talk a little bit about like, you moved to like a package model, and even just like, is it financially stable? I know people ask me all the time, like, Can you be an acupuncturist and
actually
like make money, especially like in LA, which is not cheap? Like, can you talk about that?
Totally. Yeah. I think let's start first on like the money mentality. This is actually one thing I did also here in school that I hated. We went to like a little workshop of a very successful chiro who was coming back to school to teach us all her ways. Right. Yes. And I was like, great, sign me up. And hopefully this person isn't listening, but she was like, I went to a farmer's market and I set up a booth and I was like, okay, like I'm open, like I'm a hustle. I'll do pretty much anything. I told them about my new clinic. I created a raffle. Everyone could put in their name. And I told them like one person was going to get a free treatment. She's like, guess what? I called everyone and I gave them all free treatments.
I think I just got hives. I'm like,
I was like, what?
So you just lost yourself thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And this was a business strategy?
This was what she was sharing with us. Wow, yeah. And I was like, okay. Yeah. I think there are so many different types of patients, right? And would I maybe put my name into a raffle? I mean, maybe, I don't know. But if someone's looking for a free treatment, they're looking for a free treatment. They're not going to probably become a great patient.
Yeah, no.
Maybe they will. That's like a huge generalization, but
if you're looking for a deal, you're not looking for, there's an expression, it's like you can have a good, fast, or cheap pick too. Yeah. Acu takes its time. I don't know if you can go fast, but like, I don't think you can like have an amazing service that's like incredibly cheap. If you're looking for cheap, not like, hey, I'm looking to fit my budget, because I think that's important to talk about a budget and what's realistic.
Totally.
And I think, but also like, if you're looking for cheap, that kind of like, it shows how they're interpreting your service and how they view you.
Yeah. Well, and how you view yourself. If you're giving a free treatment away, like even now I have, people on normal pricing. I have some on a little bit lower for different reasons, or I would rather just treat them like pro bono, not it's free, but for a specific reason. Yeah. Right. Not like, oh, I just don't have much self-worth and I think I need to treat 30 people for free in order to maybe get business. Like I never had that model. And especially when I started, I didn't treat anyone for free. Even my parents paid me like a little bit. So they're like, this is something you went to school for. This is, worth something. I'm going to give you something.
I kind of exchange parents. It sounds better.
I mean, they didn't pay me a lot, but
that was your savings. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Your allowance.
Yeah.
So I think figuring out your own like self-worth, and I'm not surprised that people don't leave school with that, because again, they tell you like, you'll never succeed without insurance and blah, 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 all these things. So like, how can you then leave and be like, what I do is worth $200 an hour or $300 an hour or $500 an hour, whatever it is. You have to really feel that. And it does take time, right? Like you have to figure out like, am I giving people good results and do they value what I do? But definitely don't like cut yourself short on that and don't give out free treatments. I don't know how that woman, or if she even became busy or what she was charging. Maybe that's
why she was talking at the school. She ran out of patients.
I don't have time to talk at a school.
I don't know. I mean, glad you made time today.
Yeah. No, of course.
But no, so with that, I mean, moving into a structure where you're kind of designing a treatment plan and then you're investing in a package. And I use the word investment for like a specific reason there, because it is an investment, and I feel like someone's agreeing, they're making an agreement with you. Like, I'm going to come in. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. I think when I started my own spot, I had packages, which I've now changed. And again, this is like, it's always changing. Yeah. I think people hear package and they think of like a discount, right? Like you're buying so many up front, so you get a discount, which in some cases is true. Sure. But what I'm doing now is more of like, I like to call it a treatment plan for that reason, where I phone consult every patient that, is on the wait list and wants to come see me. One, to make sure it's a good fit, because this is like a long-term relationship, and to explain to them how I work. And I'm like super unapologetic. Like I'm not like every other acupuncturist. If you want to work together, this is the way it is. Like depending on what they're coming in for, it's going to be 3 months. It's going to be 6 months. This is how acupuncture works. Like it has to build on itself. I can't heal your chronic hormone issues from 10 years in 2 appointments. It's just right. Like else I would be really, making it, but
really have to bump those prices up if that's the case.
You have to really walk people through it. And again, they don't teach you that in school.
No,
because you're treating on insurance. Those people don't value what you're doing. They don't pay for it.
Yeah.
So I really educate patients on that. And then I create this plan and I'm like, this is what the plan's going to cost you. Mm-hmm. Most people pay for it up front. If that's not possible, we can have like a payment plan and everything's included. You want herbs, or like, I want to give you herbs. I want to give you a book that you should read. Like, it's all just in there because that's part of outcomes. And even though that may be very different than other acupuncturists, most people now are like, whoa, this is what I've been looking for.
It's a whole plan.
This is more tailored.
Yeah.
They already have an acupuncture. Yeah. And they're like, well, what's the per appointment cost? I'm like, there is none. I don't work that way.
Yeah.
This is the package.
Yeah.
Of course, we like move appointments around if I travel or if they travel, whatever. But like, it's just, it shouldn't be seen that way, because if I tell you it's going to be $5,000 to, I don't know, regulate your period or not have pain or not be bloated anymore, you'd be like, sign me up.
Yeah.
It's not unattainable, right?
Yeah.
Versus like, well, but it's this much per hour. It's kind of like, ooh, I don't know if
because I feel like that's reductive also to say that like, oh, I'm paying this much per hour for this thing. It's like, it's also like the question is like, what is it worth to you? It's very personal.
And time outside of face-to-face time, right? Like, I have a new patient, I sit down and case study them and sometimes work hours on like, what do I project the next few months to be like? What herbs do I want to give them? What should I do? That's somehow not ever worked into the per appointment price, right? Like, those are still my hours.
Yeah.
So I think everyone, again, works so different. And some acupuncturists, they just exist to like have people come in and out as they want, stress management, whatever. That's great. Like, that's what I do.
Yeah.
When I go to acupuncture, but for my patients and the things that I'm treating, it just doesn't work that way. So and I don't want to waste their money.
100% of people that come to you are like on a specific plan, or and it can change from time to time, right? Like, I mean, I can say personally, like, I came to you being like, I've been on birth control for 17 years and I now am in the place in my life where we want to start a family, and I'm almost 40, and like, what are we going to do? And you're like, well, first we're going to find your cycle. And I was like, what?
Step one.
Step one. I was like, oh, I thought you were just going to be like, boop, 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 boop. Nope. Okay, you're going to get pregnant. And like, that's not how it works. So like, it was like being on herbs, finding the cycle. And I'm definitely the kind of person you can like,
you were a dream patient.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
you were. You're like, I take my herbs every single morning, every single night. And
I do like a routine. So it's like, if you're like, hey, I'm the expert, I'm telling you what to do, I'm like, okay, I'm going to literally do exactly that.
Yeah.
And so, and then like I remember a really spicy point right on the ring finger, right? Yeah. Right underneath, like, but below the nail. It wasn't under the nail. And I was like, this sucks. What does this one do? And you're like, that one's going to bring your cycle specifically. Yeah. Like, and I was like, oh, sure. And 2 days later, I had, like my first period after like 20 years of being on birth control, literally, which is crazy. But also like everyone's journey to that is really different, and their relationship with their body. But what you explained to me and no one ever had in a Western medicine practice was that you have to detox your body from those hormones that you're putting in for 17 years. And you have to actually bring yourself back to that, which I thought, whoa.
Yeah. And it takes time.
It takes time.
And I don't ever I do have people who come in who are like, I wanted a baby yesterday. And that's very stressful for everyone involved. But like, ideally it's like what we did, like, okay, let's figure out your cycle. And then, okay, now you kind of have more information of when you do want to start trying. And then hopefully when you do, you're able to get pregnant and maintain your pregnancy and just less stress involved. And I don't ever want people, and that's why like fertility, I'm more like a 6-month plan. So like, if you don't get pregnant after 3 months, you're not freaking out, because we've already talked, it's going to maybe be 6 months.
Right.
And you just have to manage expectations, although it's hard. I'm like, I wish I could help you faster, but I just don't know.
Yeah. I mean, and I think even like learning like basal body temperature and using the Oura ring to track that was like such a cool thing for me. Because I felt like I was more in charge. I'm very type A. Yeah. It's one reason we get along. Yeah. I felt like I sort of had some control over this thing I really didn't have control over, but I could visualize it. I could see it. I could also look at my activity level, my stress level. And you were like, the way that you're going to get pregnant and stay pregnant is to like not be stressed out. Yeah. Which is like someone telling you like, don't be upset. And you're like, too late. Yeah. I mean, and it is a really stressful thing. And it's just something that you don't want to talk about that much. But I also remember texting you, I think you were in the grocery store and I was like, I'm pregnant.
Yeah. No, you sent me because I asked you about like what day of your cycle are you on, because I was going to see you the next day and I would see out of office preparations. Like, what are we going to do if it didn't work this month? And you're like, I'm pregnant.
I was like 3 weeks pregnant. I found out way earlier than most people do, which was also kind of unnerving. And like, you really put me at ease. I mean, there's got to be so much about your, profession that is so rewarding. I mean, aside from like the pregnancy text, which I know you just talked about getting one the other day.
They're my favorite.
A baby that got delivered the other day with a massive umbilical cord, right?
Yeah. I've had multiple patients who have given birth with like the biggest and thickest umbilical cords. And I'm not saying that it's just me, but I'm like, is this like a trend? They're all patients that I treated through their whole pregnancy. Yeah. Like the most beautiful umbilical cord. So, I mean, who knows? Could be. But yeah, it's so cool. Like full circle. I think there's some practitioners who only focus on fertility and pregnancy. And that's definitely not me. Like I like to have like a patient or two at a time because it's just not my constitution. Like it's very stressful. It's emotional for everyone, you know, like I know where they are in their cycle. And if they come in, I'm like, oh my God, I hope they didn't get their period. And if they do, we're going to go through it together, but it's a lot. But so many girls on like getting off birth control and watching them even make that decision on their own. Some come to me knowing they want to do that. And then a few weeks ago, I had a patient who came to me for all these symptoms, acne, bloating, constipation, you name it. She's like, oh, it just all started in like April. And then come to find out she got a hormonal IUD put in February. And I just we had that moment where I was like, have we thought about this being connected? No. You know, it's just people don't think about it. And I have people all the time, I have no side effects from birth control. I'm like, how would you know? Like, you've been on it for 15 years. You just think this is you and it's not.
I was a cool girl who never got my period. And I was like, I can live with that. You're like, but you shouldn't.
You shouldn't.
You shouldn't be living with that. Like, you should actually not fear getting your period every month because it doesn't have to be that bad.
No, exactly.
And I was like,
and it's actually amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing.
So this patient, you know, I told her what I thought, like some of these things definitely could be coming. They're known side effects, which she wasn't informed of before getting the IUD, right? Yeah. You should really be like checking off all the things that may happen to you. And then she made the choice on her own. She came 2 weeks later and she was like, because we were on this beginning of a 3-month plan. And she's like, you know what? I'm going to get my ID out. I want to make the most of the time and the money that I'm spending with you. Like, this is the time to do it. I feel safe to do it. I feel like if something crazy happens, you can help me. She got her IUD out. And now she's like a new person. She's like, I feel so much better. Like that this thing isn't in me and that I know she got an Oura ring. She's like, I can control, you know, if I'm going to get pregnant or not in a more intellectual way than having these hormones in me. Which also you got to get your partner on board. Like if your partner thinks that's too stressful, we have a whole nother like conversation because it should be okay that you're careful for 1 week or 10 days of the month so that you don't have to pump your body full of hormones.
Seriously. And I mean,
no man would do that.
Exactly. And I think like in heteronormative relationships, whatever you want to, you know, kind of title them as, like, I think there's also like this lack of responsibility that comes from like, you know, discomfort or like mending, like, oh, condoms are uncomfortable. It's like, so it's my problem now, you know, like definitely. And with Oura Ring, and then there's like the Natural Cycles app, which is actually like FDA approved, like
form of birth
for
control.
Being birth control. You can get reimbursed for it.
Yeah.
But what's cool is like, you know, Dan, my husband, like he was able to download the app and literally like see, and he's like, oh, like the fun days are coming. Like we get to try, you know, and like that was really cool on like our journey to like, you know, conceiving, because it was really felt like we were doing it together, and it wasn't just like, okay, like you don't have to pull out or like whatever people say. I mean, like that is like it was such a relief that I felt like I didn't have to be the informant, and that we could like have a conversation that he felt like he had information as well, and we were doing it together. And I just think that's like it was such a refreshing like way to go about it. And then I can imagine also for somebody who's going through like IUI or, you know, IVF and you know, different processes or working with a donor, how valuable that insight would be to be like as regular as possible, knowing you don't have to have a 28-day cycle. It might be 32, it might be 26. And like all of that is okay as long as we're finding like kind of some normalcy.
Totally. Yeah. I think everyone's cycles are different. And what people don't think about too is, I posted about this the other day about this insane article about birth control that came out. And
I did see that.
Don't even get me started. But one of the things was like, can you get pregnant after the pill? And it was like, yes, absolutely. Like no problem. It was like one sentence. And it's like, yes, you can get pregnant after the pill.
Yes.
It happens to some people, but also doesn't happen for a lot of people. And also, why wouldn't you want to like put your body in the best state and version of itself before you get pregnant.
Yes.
Because you are passing your DNA and in Chinese medicine, it's called Jing, your like essence into your baby from both parents. Like, maybe don't do that right like the 1 month after you got off the pill.
Yes, totally.
Maybe.
And also, like, I mean, it's been interesting too, like as a pregnant person to like be treated for like the different symptoms. Like, and I always feel like kind of guilty being like, it's actually been like a pretty easy pregnancy for me. And I do credit like a lot of like,
you come every week.
I literally come every week. Yeah. But also I'm like, oh, I have heartburn, which I've never had in my life. And you're like, boop, boop, boop. And then I'm like, wait, I feel amazing now. Yeah. Like, and it is actually like for controlling symptoms. I've seen that firsthand too. Just like, I think I tell my acupuncturist, I tell you more than I tell my doctor. Like I go into my doctor, like my OB or like my, internal medicine, Western doctor. And they're like, how's it going? And like, I tell them like tip of the iceberg stuff. Yeah. But I feel like I tell you, I'm like, I'm having crazy dreams. And also like, I'm waking up like too much to pee. And also like my feet hurt. And like, I don't know if any of this is related. And you're like, actually, like actually it is. Yeah. And then I feel maybe less crazy doing it to make myself feel better.
No, I mean, but that's the relationship that we're able to have again, because insurance isn't involved, right? Like I would never have that time to spend with you. Yeah. If I couldn't spend that full hour, even like most patients, I'm like 20 minutes with them. Yeah. You never really get that with
and if you were treating 4 patients an hour, going room to room, moving things, it would just be stressful. And you're like, wait, did I put this needle? No, that was a different patient.
Oh my God, I forgot. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot. Like they've been cooking in there for.
I literally did that in school. I would like forget some people. Yeah, because I just like, or someone else is in charge and then they go on break and they're like, take my needles out. And you're like, okay. And it's chaotic, but.
Can you imagine? That would be like if you went and had like a facial, they're like, take the mask off of her, and like they take off the mask and it's not even your facialist. You're like, who are you? Where did you come from?
Yeah.
Like,
what? Well, that's like free insurance treatment. So you get what you pay for,
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, thinking about like, who might be listening to this, if they're interested in like moving toward that space of like having their own thing, like when is the time to emancipate yourself from the corporate chaos, and like what's the advice there, and I know that it's different for everyone, but if you were to say like if it's X, Y, and Z, like it's probably time. And maybe it's also like if you have your own practice, like thinking about, you mentioned the wait list, like when is it time to have a wait list? When is it time to like raise your prices? When is it time to break up with a patient? Like there's a lot in there. So I'll pause.
Yeah. I think if you're thinking about leaving like a corporate job in really any industry and like starting your own thing, either from scratch or you just have like a side hustle. I mean, I think everyone knows when there's a time, right? You can make kind of an ideal goal for yourself. Like, well, I want to make this much per month before I leave, but you also have to realize that it may be really hard to get to that point while you're still energetically and like time management wise in a whole nother job. So like if you could just leave and then within a month or two grow that business, like just do it. I mean, obviously be responsible and have savings and support, but I think everyone who has that kind of like entrepreneurial spirit, like you just know, you know when it's time.
Totally.
And don't let anyone talk you out of it. And I think also make some people make you accountable. Like you were one of those people for me where I was like, once I speak this to her, right? Like my partner knew, my parents knew, but like once I told you, I was like, I also knew that you weren't going to let me like not do it at some point. So find that person.
It accelerated very quickly because it's like, I heard you say like your dream. And I'm like, I can't live knowing like, that you're like not
make a
living
spreadsheet.
Yeah. Like where's your fucking spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Let's see it.
So I think it's different for everyone, but I also think if you're just crunching numbers and you're at a point where you're equal, like that's where I got to. I was like, even if I was making the same amount, like the mental space that I would have free would be worth it. Or even if I just worked less hours, but made the same amount, also great.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's kind of was like the biggest, like I got to that point and I'm like, okay, easy decision. And worst case scenario, like none of my patients followed me and I had a bunch of time. I had a bunch of things planned that I was going to do. I was like, cool, I've been wanting to read this and go here. None of that ended up happening. But I think like
squeeze in those trips.
Make the worst case scenario like good.
Yeah.
And then what else did you ask?
Well, I mean, I think also like when you're thinking about like who's coming into the space, like when you have a patient and you're like, this isn't a match. This isn't the vibe. Like, do you fire patients? Like, or break up with them? Is that a nicer way to say it?
Yeah.
how does that, like, how do you make that call? Because it is tough. I mean, like, you know, obviously, like, not everyone's going to be the right match.
Yeah.
And it is so important, you were saying, to have like a rapport and to feel like there's a connection there.
Yeah.
So how do you call that out, or do you call that out?
It's much easier now.
Okay.
Before, I would just go in blind. Like, patients would be led into my room as new patients, and I would have like seen their paperwork, but I don't know anything about them. And maybe they were like a referral or whatever. And then that's so much easier to like get to know them. But some of them were just totally random or found me on Instagram or something. Yeah. And some are great. And then others, I'm like, this really wasn't the best fit, or they're not on board with like the philosophy that I have of consistency. So I just, again, unapologetically like would explain, this is the way. And there were other acupuncturists that I could also like offload to if I felt I needed to. Now that doesn't really happen because I phone consult everyone and make sure they're a good fit before. And that's not to say like, I mean, there's some patients I love a lot more than others, right?
Sure.
That's just life.
Yeah.
But as long as I'm helping them and we have a good relationship and they're respecting what I'm doing, like nothing drives me crazier than when people are like, and do this point and do that point. Can you also do something for this? Like, I've crafted your treatment. This is what you're getting.
Stop fucking it up. Yeah.
Sometimes I will like give in to people and I understand. They're like, oh, but also this little thing is bothering me. I'm like, oh, okay, easy. But there's a limit, and like, you're paying me for a reason. And there are some patients that really sometimes go into that realm, but I realize it's my job to like
pull them back. Yeah.
And not let it get out of control. So let them run wild.
Yeah. I mean,
do you want to just do the treatment?
Yeah. You seem like do you want to put your own needles in? Like,
I mean, there's some people that really feel like they know a lot. You know, like, I read this book on Chinese medicine and
I watched a TikTok and now I would like to teach you something.
Like, please.
I will not do that.
Yeah.
I would be way too scared of what could happen. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, and then like my other question was kind of more about like the wait list. And like, when you have a wait list, that's a signal that like things are going well.
Yeah.
But also like when you have kind of the opportunity to like look at pricing, look at all of these factors, like when do you know it's time to like have more patients, or maybe raising prices sometimes can like, you know, have people fall off and they're like, this doesn't work for me. So how do you kind of moderate the wait list to make it still feel feasible? And like, if I'm signing up for a wait list, it's a real thing. Like, is there a communication? Like, what do you do? Yeah,
it's been, I mean, a huge blessing. Like, since I started my practice, I now have a wait list of over 100 patients, which is just like,
congrats. I mean, that's amazing.
It's literally insane.
That's awesome.
So multiple things. One, I felt paralyzed by it at first, and I just was like, I don't know what to do. Now I have a hyper, organized spreadsheet that tracks everyone. At first I would respond to everyone that contacted me, letting them know they're on the wait list. I'm fortunate to now have an assistant that helps me do that. And she puts everyone in and like their status. And then we just recently kind of came up with a plan of like, how are we going to like triage this? Because I don't want 100 people that could take me like a year to get through it, at which point they don't need treatment anymore. So we're basically like grooving through the wait list. We're calling everyone, in steps. If you haven't heard from me yet, that's why. But we're like, let's just get through everyone, explain to them what I do, because some of them may just not even be up for it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not in their budget, which is totally understandable. And I felt like I'm losing sleep over 100 people that may only be 50 people. Right. So I'm like, I need to just get it under control. Raising prices is super emotional. And that's been a process now multiple times since I started, because I did like cut myself short when I first left. It's like, I got to keep it kind of similar to what I was charging before.
But it's something that a company made up that didn't know anything about acupuncture.
Right.
So they just like invented pricing and you're like, I guess I have to follow this model in my own thing.
Yeah. And my pricing there had to kind of also be based off of other things in the space.
Right.
And like always be less than chiropractic, because chiropractors spend the whole hour with their patients. And I did like all this BS that I'm like, I'm not going to subscribe to that. Like,
no, we're not.
A treatment is a treatment.
A treatment is a treatment.
So I did a little raise when I left. Then I did like a middle raise, and now I've just done another raise. And that's also evolved into this like treatment plan package of like herbs and books and all the other stuff that I can like.
Yeah. So you're getting more for what you're paying for.
Yeah.
And you're probably getting more out of like treating these patients because you're seeing, like you said, results. It's very results oriented.
100%.
And it's not always like long term. And then there's other people who may come in and they have a specific injury that they're treating or things like that. So like,
we're going to get through it and then I'm going to discharge you and you can like come as needed. But the goal for me is not to retain everyone forever. And that's also not how, like, I want to be able to keep having open spots to keep helping new people.
Yeah.
But like you said, it is results oriented. And, I think it's like a mentor of my fiance in business. He always says like, you're selling an outcome. You're not selling a treatment.
Yeah.
And like we talked about, like $5,000 to solve mystery bloating you've had for 10 years, like easy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something else you've done really cool is like diversifying your revenue streams, you know, and like thinking about like different ways, like you mentioned bloating. Let's talk about the tea. I mean, like Rest and Digest is like, spilling the tea on the tea. I mean, it's been like really amazing as a product, like something that I've tried, but also like people, it has kind of a cult following.
Yes.
I mean, like, I don't know if you knew you were starting a cult, but you did
not. Yeah.
So how did the tea even come about?
Yeah. In school, I mean, I like to say I was once bloated and confused and now I'm not. And I had crazy, weird stomach problems, just like it seems like everyone does now. And I couldn't figure it out. And I was put like, oh, let me eliminate this and do this allergy test and never eat a raspberry again or like whatever. And then when I was in school, I started drinking a tea that was a version of what I now have as Rest and Digest. At that time, it was like powders and chunky and like just not super appetizing. But I was committed. And I'm like, I'm going to drink this twice a day for 2 months. I kind of like made up my own little protocol and it healed my gut like crazy. I mean, faster than 2 months, but I just was like, I'm going to just stay on this plan.
To make sure it's in fact this.
Exactly. Yeah. And it also helped me tease out, you know, what foods don't work for me and whatever. But I had such a cool experience with it that once I started treating patients and I noticed, okay, everyone else is bloated, I kind of like tinkered around and was like, okay, I'm going to, you know, tell them to go buy this and do that. And I would tell patients how to make the tea. Like no one did it. Some people did, but like not really.
Kind of complicated.
Yeah. It wasn't that hard, but then they'd be like, well, can't you just make it for me? And I was like, really? Like you'd pay me to make the tea for you?
Yes.
And they were like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So it started like that. And
it does taste better if somebody makes it for you.
Totally.
I mean, you know?
So of course I like had to make it cute and I found like the tea bags I wanted to use and I was just hand filling bags and giving them, you know, in a packet of 30, which was like 15 or 30 day protocol. And I would give them a certain amount of bags and they all had the same results as me. So that was like the first step of, I think if you set out to make a product, it's like not always successful, but this was like tested in the most secure way of like, I had no pressure.
Tested on humans.
Yeah. I didn't like spend a bunch of money. They all just were like, damn, this tea really works. And it gave me the confidence.
Really good? I mean, I can imagine like what a bolster to like the confidence, but also even just like, okay, I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah. I think anytime you sell a product, it's hard. One, you want repeat customers. You don't want to disappoint anyone by like the money they spent. And I think that would eat me up inside if I just was making some BS thing and selling it, but I actually know that it works and it's like changed people's lives. So yeah, it started very small like that. And then people saw me post about it on Instagram. They're like, oh, could I order it? And it literally took me months to like get that together. And I was like, okay, I set up a Shopify and I ordered it or made it orderable online. And like the first month, so many people ordered it. And I was like, wow, this is good extra income.
So were you like just packing and shipping from your apartment?
Totally. Yep. We had like a whole setup on how we would make it and pack it. And then I was very lucky to give Tinks the tea through a relationship I had with her. And she loved it. And she posted it one day, like fully unsponsored, just on her own because she loved it. And the tea just went off.
Oh my gosh.
I mean,
that's
like
awesome.
went off.
Yeah. Thank you, Tinks.
Thank you. But also overwhelming.
Yeah.
Me and Jen were like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Oh, these are too many orders.
Literally, we kept like, we were like, hey, we can make this many per week. And so we kept the sales
I Love
going.
Lucy, like with the conveyor belts and the chocolate.
Yes.
Like that's what I'm imagining.
That was us.
Yeah.
We kept setting things to pre-sale so that we're like, okay, we know we can deliver. Cause that was an anxiety of mine. I'm like, I got to get this to people when I promised.
Yeah.
And it's honestly just been like nonstop since then with so many other people that have gotten the tea and love it and post about it and have had real results. And only a few months ago did we even move to like full manufactured bags. So we made by hand in a year 40,000 tea bags. Like I literally have a shoulder injury from scooping so much. But that's like the hustle in it.
Yeah.
I didn't spend any money that we didn't have or we weren't making. It was a huge investment to like make it into these like manufactured beautiful bags we have now. And I just wasn't sure, like, is this going to still be a thing? Is it a fad? Like, but we're
past the fad point.
And we're growing, which is really fun. And also being able to give more people relief than I could like physically see in a day.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's always a limit as a practitioner in that way. So if I can help someone in, you know, New York with their bloating, Texas, literally wherever, and not have to be there.
Yeah.
It may not be the same as like a full treatment plan in acupuncture, but anything is better than nothing. So that feels really, really good.
I think that's amazing too, because like it is like scalability of time when you're an individual practitioner is really complicated because you can't like clone yourself. I mean, that was always a thing with like, I mean, I wish too. Also like probably
if you could clone both of us, we would be the only people to run the plan.
Yeah. We'd have Jenna and Dan on standby, but like they would just be excited to have like more of us. We'd be like, this one's going out to go shopping, but this one's really making the income over here. And that was always the thing with like coaching from you is like so challenging because it's really, you know, you have these executives that are like, you're seeing the results, you're getting these, you know, programs off the ground and they're feeling really amazing. And then like 4 people reach out and you're like, I literally can't because energetically, I can only give so much. You spend all of your day putting things out for other people. You've got to find ways to like pull that back for yourself. And I think like with the tea, even though there is still the packing, the shipping component and everything, it is really interesting when you can like scale your energy and your gift in that way, which is like very, very clever.
Yeah. And it all just comes in stages. Like when we got this manufactured tea delivered, we're like, oh, like the amount of time we spend is going to be so much less, but really we're spending the same amount of time, but we're just selling 3 times as much now. So like you have to take those things into consideration. But I do feel like either this product or another product, you know, learning from what I've done with this one will give me and my partner freedom of how we want to live life later on, which is like, maybe we do spend a couple months in Europe each summer and we don't have to be here all the time. But without something like this, it's much more stressful, of course.
Yeah,
like,
you're a bit more tethered to like the physical location.
Yeah.
I mean, let's talk about a little bit like what's ahead, like what's coming up for you. We talked about physical location, that maybe is a parlay, like you mentioned it, teased it. What's up?
I mean, more details to come once they're solidified, but my, you know, Jenna, my fiance is an amazing chiropractor and we have very different patient demographics, but they somehow still end up like crossing over, even if it's just like my patient's husband or something like that. And so because we share a lot of patients, we do want to be together in a space, but true to form, still independent and separate because we're both very much like that. So we're looking at expanding, having a bigger space. I need more than 1 treatment room. I won't be treating 4 people an hour, but at least 2 an hour. So I'm efficient and can see more people.
Definitely.
And also just we want to create a space that's like a hub for other people to come in and like show off their craft and have little pop-ups and little events and workshops and things that are just like community driven. There's so many, especially women in LA, that are doing something cool, but they don't have a space.
There's a vibe here. It's happening.
So so we're working on that, but you know, it's a lot, and it
is a lot
learning too. Like you want to grow, but then just the business side of it is like, they want all this, they want you to have all this money and all this capital to like sign a lease. And you're like, well, how can I grow my business if I can't get in a bigger space? And like learning those steps too has been fascinating of like, well, now I understand why some people are kind of kept in this small room or bubble for their whole career, because it's really hard to make it out past that.
Yeah. And I think that also like as a business owner, like what's kind of like the hallmark that you would like to be known for, like in that space? Because I feel like you are doing something different, and like sometimes being different is hard. You know, actually I would say almost all the time being different is hard because people are going to like pick you apart. So like, what would you like to be most known for?
I think just being authentic to like who I am, and also seeing that in my patients and letting them be who they are, but in a way that's most optimal for their health. Like I just I'm not an extremist in like the things I do or my opinions. Like I'm an extremist in like the way I work and learn and things like that. But I think meeting patients where they're at, letting them kind of create this wellness world for themselves that I can support them. But they're like, I still really want to eat the croissant. And you're like, great, eat it and drink the tea or whatever that is to have balance, because that's how I live. And I want my patients to be that same way too. Like, I'm not a crazy, like, biohacking is the most annoying word. And I don't get it.
I'm like, just billionaires trying to live forever.
Yeah. I'm like, that's not me. I just like go to In-N-Out every once in a while and I try to work out and I try to be balanced. But yeah, I think just the fact that I can have success, be a good practitioner while also still being, you know, myself in the way I dress, in my opinions, in all of those things, to me is like, that's a forever career that I'll always be happy in doing versus, you know.
And even if that, like, how you spend your hours during the day evolves, like, I think that there's still that opportunity to, like, bring that authenticity, bring that passion and have it come through. It's a through line of everything you do. And each new step that you take is definitely like the culmination of all of this legwork that you've put in.
Well, it's going to change, right?
Like, change. It should change.
Yeah. Like maybe once I get pregnant or I have a family, like I feel like I'll be able to
needles in
I think you know enough.
It should be fine.
I think just being able to be flexible and changing but still relate to your patients. You know, it's like, I think really why I've had success is that real relationship.
I mean, I think authenticity also, it shows leadership. Like, and when you're a solo entrepreneur, like, it's sometimes people don't think about themselves as leaders, but I think that it is about that. And like, if you can show up as a leader, oftentimes that is needed to be balanced with vulnerability and openness about your own experiences. So like, I mean, so much of what you shared today is very vulnerable, you know, and stuff like you told some stories that I don't think you've shared, which I'm really appreciative of. But I also think that, like, as you grow the business, like, being honest about what you need from your patients is just as important about them being honest with what they need from you.
Totally. Yeah. And that, I mean, I didn't mention that in the price sector, but that's part of too of like raising prices is because I have a plan. Like, I want to move all of us into a better space, more healing space. That it costs money, you know, like I think people don't want to talk about that, but it's okay. Like, we've got to figure out the steps as long as they're intentional.
Capitalism is going to be a component. Like, sorry, like, it's just gonna, we can't do the raffle with the free giveaways. Nor do we want to.
Yeah. The new landlord isn't going to take my
raffle receipts. No. Vibes.
I want to
see you in vibes. Yeah. I'll try that one at Bottega next time. Yeah.
I wish.
If only. I mean, so is there anything that, like, you want, like, you know, to promote, to plug? I mean, we talked about a lot of things today. Where can people find you? I can't believe we're coming up on our time.
I know.
There's so much more I feel like we could talk about. We'll have to probably do a number 2, a different one. What would you like to?
You can find me on Instagram at Dr. Natazia Stolberg. I'm sure it will be linked.
It sure will.
It's my just mix of personal and work Instagram, because again, that's just who I am. I can't have two.
It's too much to do too.
No, it's no time. Wayclinic.com is my website and also my clinic name. If you want to become a patient, please submit your name and
on the wait list.
We'll add you to the wait list.
And you just heard how it works. So it does work. The wait list does work.
Yes,
And that's the way that WEI.
And then the tea is Dr. Stolberg's herbal tea, rest and digest. The website's drstolbergstea.com.
That's
also
easy.
Linked. Easy.
We love it.
Order the tea.
And
send me your
results.
I've literally come to tears with some of the like messages that I get of people just like, you know, I've been bloated for years and this has changed my life. And that's just amazing. Like, that's why we're doing this.
Well, thank you so much for sitting with us today. This is amazing. Please go find Dr. Stolberg on Instagram. You will be amazed. And this has been amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Stolberg has shared an exclusive offer for Don't Fuck This Up listeners. Head over to www.drstolbergstea.com and receive 15% off your purchase of Rest and Digest tea using promo code Don't Fuck This Up. And if you're really in your bag, you can spring for the super fan sweatsuit and tea bundle. That's www.drstolbergstea.com, promo code Don't Fuck This Up. Don't Fuck This Up is a podcast written, produced, and edited by Lauren Alvarez. New episodes dropping every Wednesday. Be sure to follow, rate, and review this and every episode. And until next week, please keep it together and try your best not to fuck this up.